Students, I've made 3 different videos. This is the first one in the series of 3, and on it I discuss how to take out a common factor and the sum and difference of cubes and squares. The second video and third video I will specifically cover trinomials on the second video. The third one I will do grouping, and then I do one final capstone problem, which is a summation of all the methods that I've shown you. Let's look at our first polynomial that needs factoring. The first step you do on any problem is to look for the common factor. So as I look at the numbers here, I've got a 4, a 12, and a 28. Now I know it's not necessarily the best factor, but I do observe that they are all even, so I know a 2 will certainly be able to come out of this. In addition to that, I also observe that every term has an x and a y, so I'm actually going to take out a 2xy to begin with. 2 times 2 would give me my 4, x times x would give me my x squared, and of course I'm now left with the y. When I take the 2xy times my next term, my 2 times my 6 is 12, x times x squared is x cubed, and y times y squared is y cubed. Finally, by the same token, the 2 times the 14 is 28, x times x is x squared, and y times y squared would be y cubed. Now, I could also look at this in the reverse. I could look at the first term, for instance, and say I had 2 x's, I took out 1, I was left with 1x. I had 1 y, took out 1 y, and was left without a y, etc., etc., etc. You could even factor the numbers if you wish, but I think it's easier to simply look at those as a division problem the way I laid out. Hopefully at this point you'll notice, hey, wait a minute, every one of these terms still has an x, and they're all still divisible by 2. So let's go ahead and take out another 2x from the remaining terms. I've left the 2xy, the common factor I already found, and we're going to look at the remainder of the terms. And I'm going to take a 2x out of those terms. Notice, when I take a 2x out of my 2x, I'm left with nothing. Remember, when you're multiplying and dividing and you're left with nothing, you have a 1, because 1 is the multiplicative identity. At any rate, when I take a 2 out of my next term, a 2x, I'm left with a 3, one of my x's, and both of my y's. When I take the 2x out of the next term, 14 divided by 2 is the 7, I take out my x, and I'm left with my 2 y's. At this point, I hope you notice I've actually taken out 2 things. What I actually have is the first common factor times the second common factor times the trinomial. What I can do is I can combine those first 2 factors together, and I end up with 2 times 2 is 4, x times x is x squared, and a y as my common factor times the trinomial that I was left with.